Hi folks, this is Friday the 9th of February 2024 and therefore the little shrine I've got going behind me dedicated to the great Franz Beckenbauer who passed away on the 7th of January. It's starting to get a bit unseemly. We've gone over a month now of mourning. We're not in his family, we're not members of the Beckenbauer family, so we really need to let this go. I say we, I'm using the royal we there, and I'm no Kaiser, I'm no emperor, I just mean me. I've got to get that down, and believe me, it could have been a lot. There could have been a lot more stuff up there. I'm probably going to show you a few of the items I've got in relation to Franz Beckenbauer through the course of this video, which I need to make to apologise to Franz Beckenbauer. And now I'm just apologising to his memory. Too late for me to apologise to the man himself. What are you talking about, Alec? Do you think Franz Beckenbauer's family, never mind Franz Beckenbauer himself, could give a monkeys about what have you done? Some tweet or something like that, saying he wasn't as good a player as people made out of. You wrote with one of your wee crappy articles for a magazine, an obscure magazine somewhere that doesn't quite praise him as much as he deserves to be praised. Therefore, you've kind of bummed yourself up by implying that you need to apologise to Franz Beckenbauer. No, I actually need to apologise to Franz Beckenbauer for something that happened. I'm not talking in the abstract here. Something that happened between me and Franz Beckenbauer. Something that happened in person between myself and Franz Beckenbauer when I met the great man. Yeah, I'm going to explain the details of that, but first things first, passed away, one of the all-time greats of world football, Franz Beckenbauer. This is going to sound weird, and don't believe me if you don't want to, but I'll tell you how I found out. Now, it was 7th of January, it was a Monday. And it was that time, if you were lucky enough, same as myself, to be off all the way through the festive period, Christmas and New Year, if you're lucky enough to have that on a holiday, it certainly wasn't the case for a lot of people. You maybe do the same thing as me. And I certainly do it after all kind of extended holidays where you try to retain, you have to get back to your work, but you try to retain a bit of the kind of exotic, interesting person that you think you became during the holidays just because you were away in the Algarve having fancy drinks and what have you down by the poolside or looking out over the water. I've never been to the Algarve, I don't really know how it works there. But, or in my case, as it was over Christmas and New Year, sat on the sofa watching so many programmes about archaeology. I didn't remember a single thing because I was drunk, and that's why they seemed so interesting. And you think yourself an interesting person because you're watching interesting stuff, because you are interested. You start thinking, oh, that must be interesting. No, doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that at all. I didn't remember a single thing about any of the things on archaeology because it's clever, and I'm not. Stuff about bones. There was swords and like BC, the Romans stuff. Don't remember a single thing about any of those programmes I watched, but you do that when you go back to your holiday. I'm not going to be the same bitter, worn down, boring person who just comes in for their work, stuffs their face, watches some telly, and goes back to bed. I might still do the curry night at Spoons, but I'm going to have a pina colada. I'm not going to have a pint of lager. That'll remind me of Julio, the pool boy, and it's like Julio, even a Portuguese name. I can't do the Algarve bit at all. All my Portuguese name, like Deco, he's Brazilian. Paulo Futre, Paulo the pool boy in the Algarve. But something happens. You get back to your work, first day back, and then slap, bang, you're thrown back into reality straight away. All your plans to retain some of that holiday buzz during your work life just go straight out the window. The car doesn't start, you got a flat tyre, your train's late, the bus your own breaks down or something like that. You get into your work and your gaffer's got you starting a job with somebody else. I want you to train this person, or no, you're going to move to a different office or work out a different van or whatever it is you do at your work. Something happens. The first thing is like, bang. No, we're back to reality here. Slaps you about. Now, I don't really put any effort or any care into any jobs that I do. The only thing I care about is football. And I was actually in a bit of a holiday because Rangers had just played their last pre-winter break game against Kilmarnock. Was that 2nd, 3rd of January? And it was a SPFL Premiership winter break. And I don't trust people who say, oh, I really miss the football when it's not. I can't wait for the summer to be over so I can get back to watching my team again. Really? I've said this before on here, folks. It's a common theme with me. If you care as much as Sky adverts would certainly imply that we all care about our football club, it really can be quite draining. Especially at Rangers, there's so much going on there, and we're always constantly trying to win the league. And if we don't win the league, it's a disaster. And if we do win the league, well, you're going to win it next year. It never really lets up. I'm quite happy to get a break, quite honestly, sometimes. And I was thinking, I'm going to look up a bit, I'm going to read a bit of archaeology, I'm going to get into that stuff for the 3 weeks that the Premiership is shut down. I'm going to avoid football. And I was thinking this as I was sitting watching Sky Sports News on the first Monday back at work. And my wife, she getting kind of early from her work, her first day back, and she was obviously of the same mind, because like, let's go for a walk. Let's not just go and make dinner, bitch about our day, and then, fall out with each other while we have something to eat, and then, argue about what we can watch in the telly, and then go to our bed in a bad mood and wake up in a bad mood. Let's change it up. Let's try and retain some of that exotic, chilled out holiday feeling that we had just 2 or 3 days ago. So we'll go out for a walk, and we'll see if there was the last dying embers of daylight still in the air. We'll go for a wee walk round about the block. And she's like, right, I'll go nip upstairs and get a jacket or whatever she was going upstairs to get. And I'm like, right, okay, I'll go and get in. We've got a wee bit in the wee hall we've got just next to the front door, a bit with jackets and hats, and I was needing my hat because it was pretty freezing. And that's it, there's my Bayern Munich hat. It's a Bayern Munich hat. And I don't really wear hats except when I'm at the football, and if you've been watching Jersey Night, I was just gifted one, an absolutely beautiful Harland and Wolff Welders hat from a chap, Finlay, who watches Jersey and liked one of the pods I'd done mentioning Harland and Wolff Welders and football in Northern Ireland, and the great man that is Steve Davis, and other connections between Rangers and Northern Ireland. So that was a beautiful thing. It was absolutely a lovely gift, and I'm wearing that with pride these days because you need it, because it's absolutely freezing. But normally, if I'm going out for a walk, because I'm morbidly obese, I'm sweating buckets by the time I basically go over the front door. As soon as I hit the pavement, that's me. I'm already sweating buckets. I actually need to take my hat off to cool down. I use the bald napper to like a wee kind of fridge, a wee kind of air conditioning system. So it was really cold. I was probably really run down for the booze I'd had over Christmas and New Year. So I needed a hat, and this was honestly the first time I'd worn this all year. It's 40 pieces. It's got the 4 stars. I mean, Bayern Munich have got 5 stars above their crest. Is it more? I don't know. They have a strange. I used to think it was for the Champions Leagues that they'd won, but the stars system for how many Bundesligas you won in Germany is a bit complicated. It's not just 1 star for 10 every 10 Bundesligas you win. I think you get 1 for the first 10, and then you get 1 for 5. It's a really complicated, as the Germans are wont to do it. But yeah, I hadn't worn it for ages. I usually just wear it when I'm going out for a walk, like first thing in the morning. It's absolutely Baltic. So I leave the room and I just walk into the wee hall to pick up my hat, my Bayern Munich hat, and I go back into the room, and there it's up on the TV screens, Sky Sports News. It's all in black. Franz Beckenbauer has died. Unbelievable. I feel. I mean, it's just a coincidence, but it's not really. I think all coincidences you can kind of break them down. The fact that I love German football, and I've had a thing for the German national team, and therefore for Bayern Munich in their period in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. That's how I ended up having a Bayern Munich hat, which was gifted to me by an actual Bayern fan from Germany who was working over in Glasgow, and I'm naturally going to be end up getting pally with him because I've got this love of German football that the two of us can relate to. So it's no a total coincidence, but it really did send a chill down the spine, and it was quite sad because I think Franz Beckenbauer, 78 years old, I think he was. That'll be a good innings. That'll be a miracle for the likes of me to make 78 the way I've lived my life. But Franz Beckenbauer, just one of the guys, he still looked like he could play when he was in his 70s, his early 70s. He's such a healthy looking guy. You thought he was going to go on forever, live his 90s, but I know he had health problems in later life, which can happen to anybody. And yeah, that was me. That was me slapped back into the world of football. And you're not getting away from this, Alec. This is something. It's just going to hit you. And I tried a few times to do a video about this, but I'm just going to give up. It's, as much as I'm going to talk about Franz Beckenbauer, I have to talk about Gerd Müller, because that's the problem. That's where the friction between myself and Franz came in throughout the course of his life. Franz Beckenbauer himself, just check up, just look on Wikipedia. Look it up on Wikipedia. Absolutely phenomenal. Was it 5 Bundesligas I think he won? Was that just with Bayern? He certainly won that one with HSV at the end of his career. But the thing was, people kept saying on Sky and what have you, and journalists have got to summarise his career. I'm saying he was one of only 3 men, and Mario Zagallo to have won the World Cup as a player and a manager. And Mario Zagallo, one of the other ones, or the first one, Didier Deschamps is the other one. He died just days earlier as well. Quite amazing. But Beckenbauer's actually won and lost the World Cup final as both a player and a manager. You know, he's part of the Germany team that was really lit up the World Cup in England in 1966. And he was asked famously to mark Bobby Charlton during the final, and that took away some of his attacking creative edge, because Bobby Charlton was a guy who required some amount of marking in that game. And then, obviously, he plays for Germany in Mexico in 1970, where they finished third in that one. And then they win the World Cup in 74 on home soil. Beckenbauer is a captain again. He wasn't a captain in 66, but he then manages West Germany in the 86 World Cup, and again in Mexico, and they lose the final to Maradona's Argentina. And in 1990, they beat Maradona's Argentina in the final in Rome. So, absolutely remarkable achievement. And you add on to that the fact that he won the Euros as a captain in 1972, West Germany. And they lost the final on penalties in 1976 as well. They lost the final literally to the Panenka, the original Panenka, the proto Panenka, against the Czechoslovakia as they were then in Belgrade in the Euro 76 final. So even when they lost, I think it's a sign of a great team. Even when they lose, it's right at the last moment. They don't let go of anything that easily. They fight to the death. And Beckenbauer, the Bayern Munich side, famously, he's from a TSV 1860 Munich, Sechzehn supporting part of Munich, and that was his team when he was a boy, and he wanted to play for them, but one of their players, he came up against him in a youth tournament, and one of the players slapped him during the game, and that was him. He just decided, no, I'm never playing for them, and he went to Bayern out of badness almost, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened to Bayern, because at the same time they also got Gerd Müller and Sepp Maier, and Franz Beckenbauer, these kind of players, just absolute legends of the game, and soon they were the best team in the world, the club side and international side, and their feats were only really equalled by the Spain side, the tiki-taka Spain side, combining all those Barcelona and Real Madrid players, which won, Euro 2008, World Cup 2010, and Euro 2012, which that was a unique feat. But as I say, Germany had been European champions 72, World champions 74, and lost Euro 76 on penalties, won the Euros again 1980. West Germany, they were amazing. I think they won 3 straight finals of the World Cup. Now, Scotland used to, when I was growing up, I don't remember the 74 World Cup finals, but 78, 82, that period where Scotland qualified for 6 out of 7 World Cup tournaments. That's what I grew up with. So I grew up with that, Scotland qualifying being the norm, and Scotland not getting past the first round, which is still the norm of any tournament. I grew up with that being the norm, so I would watch the Germans at the same time. And then Germany reached the final of the World Cup in 82, 86 and 90, obviously. And I remember them winning Euro 1980, watching that live. And there was just something about them I totally admire. There's also something kind of culturally, both in my own life, the way I'm from a working class background, there's a lot of drink around, there's bits of kind of over emotion, which are making life a bit fraught when you were a kid. And football was something you were into, and I would just see this stuff about the Germans on the telly. And you're not getting the only time you're seeing West Germany live until it was during the major tournament. Not a lot of football on the telly when I was a kid, as I'm always saying. So that made it extra exotic. But also there was something, because of the attitude that the London-based media, I would watch games on ITV and BBC, and when they're playing against England, they're playing in major tournaments in Germany, a lot of hatred for the Germans, just straightforward hatred, all based on the war, which wasn't reciprocated by the Germans at all. That would come through. And when the Germans kept, especially latterly when they're winning on penalties and stuff like that, kept winning games on penalties, the English-based media, Mark Lawrence, and lucky Germans. The Germans are so lucky, and their style of football was awful at a time when British football, the style of it was absolute garbage as well, but would grind teams into the ground in the club scene. But somehow the Germans doing that in the international scene wasn't allowed. And I was thinking, how can it be lucky? If you keep winning in penalties, surely that proves that you're good at it. It's the opposite of luck. And I wasn't buying it at all. And the big cliche, the big stereotyping of the Germans was that they were, efficient, cold, efficient, emotionless. And this is absolute garbage. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. If anything, the Germans would win stuff through arguing with each other and falling out and just getting to the point where they resolved it. And I think even then I noticed that the Germans, although a lot of big units playing for them, these aren't good looking guys. This isn't like the Brazilians or the Italians or the Spanish where they're all knocking the ball about with doing tremendous pieces of skill that I could never imagine a Scottish player carrying out. They were totally relatable, thinking, these are booze bags. You see stuff in the telly, even as a kid, of Germans drinking beer at Oktoberfest. You think, well, that's bigger than a pint glass. That's bigger than the pints my dad has. So they're drinking more than us, and yet they're better at football. What's going on here? You know? And I just thought, why can't Scotland do the same thing? If we can be less hysterical, if we can be more cold, calm, efficient, all that stuff that the Germans actually aren't in many ways, then we can get there. And I think also the thing of the Germans being, during the war, very much the bad guys, portrayed as the bad guys, although it was everybody's fault with the situation, Treaty of Versailles. You can go back, it's ABC political history, but we know what happened in the First World War, and the punishment was too much for the Germans, and that leads to the situation that leads to Hitler and blah, blah, blah. So the Germans were a nation that everybody wanted them to shut up and be ashamed of themselves, but they kept beating everybody at football, which was the one sport that I loved. So I think I felt kind of sorry for them as well, and knowing that these guys were all grown up in an age where it wasn't their fault what had happened during the Second World War. And as a kid, I just found the Germans utterly fascinating, and I had such an admiration for them that it became, I would kind of end up supporting them sometimes. Once Scotland were at a major tournament, I was supporting the Germans. And the fact that everybody else hated them just seemed to make them even more. I don't know if that's been a Rangers supporter. You're used to your team as the one that's hated. And we got a lot of over-emotional crap thrown at Rangers about, your style of play. If we would win or do well in Europe, it's anti-football, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, this is the same stuff that used to get thrown at the Germans. And I think that's what... There's so many different reasons to say, personal and kind of political and just football based. I just had a real love for the Germans, but I had a particular love. I found out about a guy called Gerd Müller. Gerd Müller, who was a striker. And that picture behind me, for example, I've got it up there with a Spielführer armband, in tribute to Franz Beckenbauer. And it's Franz Beckenbauer who is winning a header against Gerd Müller, his teammate. It's during a training session at Hyde Park before the famous clash between Germany and England in the first leg of the 1972, the Euro 72 quarter-final, which in those days quarter-finals were home and away basis. The tournament was only the last four. The actual finals was only the last four teams, last four countries after a major qualifying tournament. But the quarter-finals were a home and away basis, and a really famous win because Germany didn't win at Wembley at that point in time. They'd lost the World Cup final there in '66. We think about it was only 6 years earlier. But Germany went out and beat them 3-1 that night. It's exhilarating, such an exciting team. But this is all before my time. I don't remember these teams playing. I don't start remembering stuff till 1977. At which point Franz Beckenbauer's off the New York Cosmos, and Gerd Müller is. He's at Fort Lauderdale Strikers. I think it was by 78. I think he went over there. Gerd Der Bomber Müller. I think he went over to Fort Lauderdale about 1978, and then it didn't work. He wasn't great with his language. It wasn't great with the language skills. Kind of withdrew into himself and get into the drinking. Basically, became an alcoholic over there. And it was later on in life that Franz Beckenbauer, amongst other people, helped him. Bayern Munich pulled him out of that rut and gave him a job with the youth teams, the reserves at Bayern, and he got off the drink, and that was him for the rest of his life. Both these guys, Der Bomber, Gerd Müller, and Der Kaiser, Franz Beckenbauer, were born in 1945, just born a few months apart from each other, and they've died a couple of years apart from each other as well. And as I was growing up, I don't know, I cannot pinpoint the year, the time. I remember seeing... Is it Hugh Johns as the ITV commentator in the day? Oh, that's the way he gets them. That's the way that little man gets them. That was never mind that some people are on the pitch. I think it's all over. Wooston Home and the BBC. For the 66 World Cup final, it's the 74 World Cup final commentary was the one that always stuck in my mind. And it was Hugh Johns saying that's the way he gets them. That's the way that little man gets them. I'm like, what does he mean? To me, it just looked like Gerd Müller had just kind of poached the goal. And that's something I used to do at school, but it was all I could do at school. When I was playing football when I was a kid, I was crap at football, but I loved it. I loved playing, but I couldn't dribble. I'm slow as anything when it comes to the running as well as the thinking. I just had no other skill other than I could get in the box and poach. I wanted the glory. I'll just go and I'll just score the goals, and that was a bad thing. You're at football, you were being lazy, you were letting down your teammates. Oh, you're such a poacher. And here was this guy who, that's the way he gets him, that's the way I love him. He seems to have just scored the win on a World Cup final. And I would look it up, and you get your football magazines, Shoot, Scoop, all the stuff you were into as a kid. And this guy, Gerd Muller, kind of came to life for me. And the thing about it was, Franz Beckenbauer, I remember I saw him play, like, I never saw him playing in the flesh, but I remember I was just old enough. I start remembering stuff about 1977. So Beckenbauer, after his time at New York Cosmos, he come back to HSV, come back to Hamburg SV. A great Hamburg side in the 80s, and they won the Cup Cup in 77. They won they lost the European Cup final in 1980 to Forest, and then they won it in 1983 with Kevin Keegan. He'd left by this point, but they had Franz Beckenbauer to like Manny Kaltz and Horst Rubesch and these kind of fellas. And Franz Beckenbauer at the twilight of his career, injury prone, but they played against Aberdeen in the UEFA Cup, and this would be a season or 2 seasons before Aberdeen and Hamburg met in the Super Cup, because they'd won both the major European trophies, the two of them. But Franz Beckenbauer, he played at Pataudry, and that was a huge thing. And I remember sitting and watching the sports scene highlights. Arts Mate First, and that's a great man himself and all that, and watching Franz Beckenbauer play. But it was a life. It was part of my life. It was that kind of. With Gerd Muller, I was only ever looking back in his career. He wasn't on television as a player at any time or in any way I could ever see him. It was always recorded stuff. You'd watch Football Focus or something on a Saturday morning, Saturday lunchtime. I used to watch that, and it would show you. This is the days before you had Sky and Channel 4 with Football Italia, before you had lots of live television, live football on the telly. Any kind of programme showing any football was mostly magazine programmes. I would devour them. I would record some of them as I got a bit older and a bit more anal retentive. But you see, you get a flash of a highlight of the World Cup final in 74 or the Euros in 72. I think this is amazing. And I don't know what age exactly I was, but the thing was, Gerd Muller's career was there in its entirety for me to look at when I first heard about him. Do you know what I mean? It was all the records were there. He'd stopped playing, so it was his 68 goals and 62 internationals. The fact that he'd scored the winner in a World Cup final, he scored 2 goals in the final of the Euros. He'd scored in 2 finals of the European Cup when Bayern won it for 3 in a row. I would just look, this guy's absolutely ridiculous, but he's just a poacher. The reports I was getting, and this is also part of the reason I fell in love with him, because I didn't really know enough about him to put me off him, because he's far more skillful. He could score goals. Some of the goals Gerd Muller scored were absolutely ridiculous. For outside the box, acute angles. In the 75 European Cup final against Leeds United, is it Torfarsson? I can't remember the Swedish fella who played at the back, or maybe it was midfield for Bayern. Terry Yorth, it's one of the most disgusting tackles you've ever seen in your life. He just snapped the guy's leg. You see his leg snapping right in front of you in that tackle. So Bayern had to rejig their whole team, and Muller get pulled back into midfield, and apparently did a fantastic job because he beat Leeds 2-0. That's the great Leeds United side. Don Reviews away by this point, but there's still that fantastic Leeds United side of the 70s. And Muller comes back, does a great job in midfield, and also manages to score the winning goal as well as he does. I look back now, and here we have this. It's a European Cup final programme there, which nobody I know was at. But I procured, this is one of the rare times I'll get a programme for a game that I wasn't actually at, because it was just some way of associating myself with Gerd. I started getting really obsessed with Gerd Muller the older I got. But see, the first match I went to was in 1977, and that European Cup final was in 76. And a part of me just thinks, my dad took me to Hampden for the first time in 1980, the Scotland-Portugal match. Now I would only be 6 years old in 12th of May 1976, and there was like 50-odd thousand at that final, Bayern against Saint Etienne. Rangers had played in the Scottish Cup final just like 10 days earlier, and there was 85,000 there. The capacity at Hampden actually just been slashed to 85,000. But so there was 30-odd thousand spaces the night that Scotland played, that Bayern played Saint Etienne. I look back and I wish that somebody had taken me to that one so I could just say that I was there, that I did see Gerd Muller playing and scoring. He scored a goal in that game against Saint Etienne. Franz Roth, who scored the only goal of the game against Rangers in the 67 Cup Winners' Cup final, he scored the only goal of the game that night against Saint Etienne, but Muller scored one of those goals. He got a second goal as well in the World Cup final in 74 against the Dutch, which I've subsequently seen, having tracked down full coverage of these games, and it's a mile onside. But he moved so quickly. His timing was so this like ahead of its time almost, that he looks a mile offside. To the naked eye, he does. Initially, he's a mile offside, and then you see the replay, and it's like you don't even need to draw the lines as we do these days. He was a mile onside, so he should have. I don't know how many more goals Gerd Muller would have got if we'd had VAR in those days. It definitely would have been more than the 1,000 odd he got in all competitions when he was playing. I then moved to a job. When I left school, I moved to a job. I was straight from school. I should have stayed on at school, but I just wanted to earn money to go out with my mates and go and watch Rangers. I just wanted to go and watch Rangers home and away, football obsessed. So nobody in my family really went to uni or anything like that at that time, so that was just what we did. And off I went to work locally. ATMA's, a travel agency. Their head office just happened to be in Saltcoats, the town next to mine. It was like an old mill type employer. Everybody in the local area could go and work for ATMA's, and I got a wee job in there about a dog's body. So, but we had a football team. It was like a second chance at school, really. And I was at Dawson Academy, Stanley Primary School. Don't be fooled by the term academy. It wasn't. It was just a local. It was just a local secondary school that I went into. But there's massive school, lots of great footballers. So somebody like me who was a bit work shy or whatever, I couldn't really get into a football team, and I was always too intimidated by how well everybody else was playing for me. I ended up playing for the school volleyball team, and even then I spent most of my time on the bench. But I always resented the fact I couldn't really play organised football. And then I went to ATMA's and we started playing five-a-sides, bunch of boys who were much the same standard as myself. So we'd play fives against each other, and then we thought, well, we've got an 11-a-side team, and we'd play other ATMA's offices, other kind of sub offices or regional offices from all over the country, all over the UK. We could play them in friendlies and things like that. And eventually we got into playing. We set up a Sunday league. We basically sponsored the Sunday League in Largs at Inverclyde, the Inverclyde Training Centre of Scotland. Would train, for years, even before the AstroTurf pitch up there. Scotland, there's team pictures of Scotland, the Scotland team that won, that played against England at Hampden in 1968, training at Largs, and it's the pitch we eventually played on up there because you could hire it out. It was quite cheap, so I was. This is like kind of mid to late 80s into the early 90s, and all I could do was poach still, as far as I was concerned, because I was tall, and at that age things are a bit lively in life generally. I was quite happy to play at the back. I'll play centre half, go about trying to be a henchman and all that. And I was just useless at it. But one day we were playing the RNLI, the Largs RNLI, playing them up at Inverclyde. Centre half, I'll go up. It was a corner to ourselves, so I'll go up for this corner. The ball's bobbling about in the box, and it comes back off the post. 2 yards out, barely any longer out from the goal than Tom Forsyth's winner in the 1973 Scottish Cup final. So in I dives, with the feet, and sclaffs it over the line. And what a buzz, because it was like nets, 11-a-side pitch, there was a referee, we had strips, it was just like, yes. Now I'm still only my kind of late teens at this point, but what a feeling. And I think I did it again, another game. It was right, I'll move you up front, and I think I scored probably like 2 goals in each of the next. When we went into this league, we finished bottom of the league that we sponsored. The only reason there was a league, the only reason we were allowed in it, was because we sponsored it. It's a Sunday league, it's a pub league basically, and it was all pub teams, local Largs pub teams. And I think I scored about 2 goals in both the seasons that we played in that, but that still made me top scorer. Torschützen and Konig, as they call it in German. That made me top scorer for the ATMA's 2 seasons of trot, and I absolutely loved it. And just before I got too old, I was able to enjoy organised football. Just that feeling, going to the pub after it with your mates and what have you. After having played football, and this is at a time I started going to the pub, in West Kilbride and all that, and Football Italia had started Channel 4, so you'd be watching. Eventually you'd go and play football yourself, and then you'd go and have beers while watching Sampdoria against Inter or something. It was just heady days. And most of the football you watching Rangers on a Saturday, they'd play the 7-a-sides on a Monday night as well for that pub in West Kilbride. It was great stuff. But the only reason I was able to contribute, obviously I'd been a poacher by nature, but when I first started playing for ATMA's, I thought I need to learn something more about this. And I went to the local library because there was no internet in those days. This is how old I'm talking. And there was a book by Malcolm MacDonald, Super Mac of Newcastle and Arsenal fame back in the 70s. And I thought, oh, it's The Art of Goal Scoring or something. I can't remember what it's called. Because I've still got them somewhere, the photocopies, because I'm up in this big head office. I remember taking the book and getting out my work and on the fly, photocopying sections of it and then underlining them and all that. And he kept talking about all of it. There was basics about how to turn, how to twist, and how to read where the ball was going to land and all this kind of stuff. But one bit he just says you need to be, and if the ball just batters about and there's lots of deflections, just you make sure you're the first guy with his hand in the air celebrating, and everybody will think you've scored. I thought that's absolutely brilliant, total poacher stuff. But he kept talking about Gerd Müller. He kept talking about this guy Gerd Müller all the way through it. He's the best I've ever seen at this. The twisting and the turning, and I just more and more started buying World Soccer. And there's an article which I should have on me if I was going to do this, but I'm supposed to be talking about Franz Beckenbauer, and that's the thing. As I was growing up and falling in love with Gerd Müller, it must have happened earlier than that. But I remember reading Shoot or stuff that was in the Daily Record or whatever. Every time they'd get an ex-pro in and they would talk about his all-time 11, Franz Beckenbauer was straight in there. Franz Beckenbauer, straight away, he's in there. Gerd Müller would never get mentioned. And I'm thinking, this guy, a fellow poacher who scored in the final of the World Cup, he scored in the final of Euros, he's won 2 European, he scored 2 of the 3 European Cups. And he's just not getting the praise that he deserves. This guy Beckenbauer keeps getting the praise, and Gerd Müller gets absolutely nothing. There's a guy out there who might, by some chance, he might be watching this video. Multiple Man 78, I think he's called. His handle on Twitter. It's a fella I know. I worked with him, and we worked in a different department, didn't really know each other. And I don't know what it was, but he just came up to me one day. We'd been talking about something that get discussed in a kind of in the round in a group about football, but I never mentioned anything about Gerd Müller. I never even mentioned anything about Germany. And he just came up and he said, and you know something, I like what you're saying about such and such, because I used to get sick of looking at all these all-time World 11s we'd have in magazines and newspapers, and they never mentioned Gerd Müller, and he should have been in every single one of them. And I was like, I love you. And I'm surprised. I think that's why I don't see Derek anymore, because he probably knows that I wanted to marry him, and things got a bit weird. But it was the first person I'd ever met who got it, who understood what it was all about. And residual, that thing, I ended up kind of resenting Franz Beckenbauer because he got all the attention. Now, if you've ever seen any videos, I talked on Jersey after the night we beat Real Betis in Seville about the football vote ball series of programmes, this documentary series that was on BBC, put it out in the build up to Euro 96, which was being staged in England. Just a quick history of European football, international and club stage, and Franz Beckenbauer's on that extensively, obviously, because he was the first guy ever to captain his side to 3 consecutive European Cups. Something else that wasn't like European Cup / Champions League, the European Cup as it was then. Real Madrid had won 5 in a row in the 50s and into the 60s. They won a 6th in 1966. But they had different captains all through that, different managers as well. And Ajax, they won 3 in a row as well, but different captains, through the 3 that they won. Vilibor Vasovic, come on. Cruyff was captain in 73 when they beat Juventus. I don't know. Pete Kaiser, was he captain in 70? I can't remember who was captain in 72. But the different captains through their 3 in a row. But Beckenbauer, first guy to win 3 Champions Leagues in a trot as captain. And it's not done again. No other person to do it is Sergio Ramos, who did it with Real Madrid in it's 2017, 2018, no, 2016, 2017, 2018. Absolutely fantastic achievement. Müller and Rangers famously won probably still the best result in Rangers history, is against that great Bayern side, who were on their way to becoming the European champions and the international level. The 6 of them were playing for the West Germany side, who would win that summer's Euros. We beat them in the Cup Winners. Rangers, if you're not a Rangers fan, apologies, but I'm using the second person plural pronoun there. Rangers beat them in the 72 Cup Winners' Cup semi-final. But the season before that, they put us out. They beat us in the 67 European Cup Winners' Cup final. In Nuremberg, in Bavaria, we didn't have a striker. That was our own fault. After extra time, so Franz Roth scored the only goal of the game. Beckenbauer wasn't the captain at that point. Still a young guy, but a bit of a star. And there's footage of John Gregg trying to nail him in his own box, in the Bayern box. Franz Beckenbauer just skips away from him. That's John Gregg he's skipping away from. So I knew even as a kid, because John Gregg is just the ultimate hero. If you're of my age when you were a kid, John Gregg was God, basically. And there was this guy just skipping away from him. That was before I was born, but I'd seen the footage. This was Beckenbauer. But in the 70-71 season, the season before we won the Cup Winners' Cup, we played Bayern in the Fairs Cup, the forerunner to the UEFA Cup, and they beat us. I think it was 2-1 in aggregate. They beat us 1-0 in the old Grünwalder Stadion in Munich, and then they drew one each at Ibrox, and it was Franz Beckenbauer scored the only goal of the game in Munich, and their bomber Gerd Müller scored the only goal of the game at Ibrox. So even when they beat us, when Bayern directly annoyed us, I still was more focused on the fact that bastard Beckenbauer, who is in that photograph behind me, out jumping Gerd Müller. That's my sister got me that as a present for my Christmas one year, because she knew how much it meant to me. One of the proudest moments of my life when I was young, and this is one of the things that makes me think I must have been into Gerd Müller and knew about him even earlier than I realised, was we're watching Question of Sport. That's how old I am. I remember I was watching Question of Sport. We're still kids staying with mum and dad, and the question was, who's the last guy to score more than, or who at this point in time it was, who scored more goals in the finals of the World Cup than anybody else? My sister, Gerd Müller. And she just looked at me like, I'm learning. My wee sister, I'm like, magic. She's heard me rabbiting on so much about him that she knew. But this guy was an absolute legend, scoring goals all over the place. And I just, even when they were beating Rangers, I was getting more annoyed that Franz Beckenbauer seemed to be getting more praise than anybody else. I would do things like, I went to see Bayern Munich. I went to see Bayern at home. Was it 2001? March 2001. They were still technically the champions. Aye, that's it. They were still technically champions of Europe at that point in time. March 2002 it would be. They'd won the 2001 Champions League, and I went to see them. One of the happiest days of my life. I think it was the first time I went to football in Germany, in the old Olympic Stadium, which was built for the 72 Munich Olympics, and the opening match there, a friendly, the ceremonial opening for that game, which was now going to be Bayern Munich's home ground. They were going to move into it, Olympics, legacy stuff, all that. It's an absolutely beautiful stadium, freezing. It was really exposed, but my God, what a piece of architecture. And the friendly was against the Soviet Union. And Gerd Müller, who was going to just move in there as a Bayern Munich player, scored all 4 goals. They beat the Soviet Union 4-1, and Gerdy scored all 4 goals, just making himself at home. The first football match ever played there, their bomber. Aye, I'm having this stadium. 6 weeks later, he scores 2 goals against the Soviet Union, the 3-0 win in the final of the Euros in Brussels, and eventually in 1974, in that very stadium, the World Cup final was staged in that stadium. He scores the winner for West Germany, his last goal for the German national team, because after the game, his wife wasn't, or the players' wives weren't allowed. The German Football Association, the Deutscher Fußballbund, did not allow the players' wives to come in and join in the celebrations. It's absolutely horrendous. None of this would have happened without Franz Beckenbauer. He was just a man who pushed it all. There's a horrible film on... It's like a kind of an oompa band of a film. It's like, in addition to the carry-on genre, I think it's on Sky Movies. If you've got Sky Movies, it's called Der Kaiser, and it's a biopic, and it's the football stuff's hilarious. Maybe if you've never seen any of the Germany or Bayern team of the 70s, you'll look at it and think, oh, that's fine. And it is actually quite good if you're just looking for a quick run through the off-field stuff with Franz Beckenbauer, the kind of controversies around him, and the fact he's a bit of a Rod Stewart when it came to the ladies, just seemed to cash in the old model for a new blonde every 10 years or so. And his tax affairs a big thing, and the fact how to make money in those days, the days before footballers were getting multi-million-pound contracts, and the fact that he practically ran Bayern Munich. But that whole thing of how the Germans were actually... They had all sorts going on. The idea that they were cold, hard, efficient, boring. No, they were all up to all sorts off the park, especially. But they never let that get in the way of them winning at football. So that's a really good... Have a watch of it if you just want to get a rough idea of Franz Beckenbauer's life. But there's a bit where he's supposed to be in New York, and he's no enjoying, because New York Cosmos, it's just all the champagne and hanging about with Pele and all the stars. He's had enough of it. He wants to get back and play real football with Hamburg, and he's in his apartment. It's obviously meant to be a Manhattan apartment, and it's looking out over the Manhattan skyline, which it's like it's been done with crayon almost. It's the worst studio set you've ever seen in your life, and they've got the bad perms and all that to prove it is the 70s. And his girlfriend / wife at the time just says, "Oh, come on, cheer up. Do you want to go to Studio 54? And all right, Studio 54. You must be in New York in the late 70s. It's brutal, but to say, it definitely gives you a rundown in his career. But I'll get back. Sorry, the video, the series. Football Vote, it was on the BBC. They ask Franz Beckenbauer, they interview Franz Beckenbauer endlessly, obviously, and he talks about Bayern's first European triumph, for the first announcement of themselves. They won the championship in the 30s. Bayern, the champions of Germany in the 30s. It was a regional thing there in German football. It was just, it was a kind of playoffs basically to become champions of Germany. TSV 1860, they won. They reached the Cup final in 65, lost to West Ham at Wembley, and they won the Bundesliga in 66. So they were the kind of preeminent side. And Dortmund won the Cup in 66 at Hamden. So Bayern come along in 67 in the Cup final, and they've got it all to do, and it's in Bavaria, but they do it. And this is Franz Beckenbauer talking in the. This is in 1995 probably when they filmed this thing, and he's like, yeah, it was one of the toughest games ever. We were so lucky Rangers didn't have a striker. It was in Bavaria, it went to extra time, but any other place, any other time, Rangers would have won that game because they were a great team. And you're thinking, kudos, good on you, Franz Beckenbauer. I'm sorry I had a grudge against you, mate, for my whole life, praising the Rangers. I love you. And then he's like, and you beat Atletico Madrid in the 74 European Cup final. Yeah, but it went to a replay, only European Cup final, go to replay. We equalised in the last minute extra time. The Atletico players were a bit older than us. We were still quite young at the time, so we recovered better for the replay. Any other time, any other place, they would have tanked us. You beat Leeds United in the 75. Yeah, but Leeds United, they were a great team. Any other place, you were really lucky. We were really lucky. You're like, aye, it's just the modesty, the over modesty thing. It was just... was getting a bit much, and you just realise he was just a really nice guy. When it came to that whole German thing, I think post the Second World War, the Germans were paranoid. The powers that be in Germany were just like, you need to be ambassadors. Do not, never boast, never fulfil that kind of, the triumphalism, which, what a cheek when you see the likes of Boris Johnson or Donald Trump and all that, the way they talk just now. But everybody thought that arrogance and being a snotty arsehole it was only the Nazis that did that. Nazis, yeah, but they weren't all German, you know what I mean? And they still aren't. But so the German football team had to really behave themselves, and Franz Beckenbauer had been brought up that way, obviously, and he still was like that right to the end. Super modest when it came to talking to other people about their about his own achievements. But the minute he came under any criticism, as everybody at Bayern Munich and the German national team know, he could come out fighting, quite a thing. But what am I trying to get to? The whole point is, the reason I need to apologise to Franz Beckenbauer, the legend that he is because I've only ever, I think 4 times in my life I've deliberately got an autograph. I grew up in a Drawson. Gordon Smith, scored for Rangers against Juventus. Smith must score the Brighton Hove Albion striker in the 1983 FA Cup final, that kind of stuff. You know who Gordon Smith is. Worked at Rangers and blah blah blah. Fantastic professional, lovely guy, and he came from Stevenson. I'm part of the three. Drawson's part of the Three Toons. Stevenson's one of the Three Toons. And when I was a kid, 1978, when Gordon Smith he came to Rangers, 77, 78ish. I was 8, 9ish. I've got a lot of aunties, and every single one of them would be at a do or a function or the opening of a boys' brigade hut or something, a raffle when Stevenson or something, and Gordon Smith would be there. Gordon Smith had been brought along as I better get Alexander his autograph. Absolutely brilliant. Everybody. So I've got his autograph, but I never met him. I've still never met him. I've seen he's walked past me in the street, but I've still never actually met Gordon Smith. But I've got his autograph everywhere. I've got a whole lot of autographs. And my mum and dad got me at Rangers dances. Neither of them are Rangers supporters, but my aunt and uncle took them along to a Rangers Player of the Year dance, and Jock Wallace's autograph, Derek Parley, Derek Johnson, all that kind of stuff. I've got all the autographs. One of my girlfriends, when I was in my teens, her dad was on a business trip, and Graham Souness was on the same plane as I'm down to London, so I've got Graham Souness's autograph, that kind of stuff. But I'm not somebody who chases autographs. I just like to see players playing. I'm not like keen on meeting players at all. But one of the autographs I've got, the first autograph I actually asked for myself, was amazingly on this programme, which is of a wee boy getting Graham Souness's autograph. I just bought that programme, and it was Rangers against Bayern Munich, and outside Derek Johnson had just left. Souness had just taken over. Derek Johnson had just left to take up the job as Partick Thistle player manager, and I saw him walking along Edmiston Drive, and I was like, oh, just can I get your autograph, Derek? Because he was a hero of mine growing up. And it just happened in a moment. I didn't have time to think about it. He's like, no bother. I don't know where I don't know who had the pen, but there he goes. Derek Johnson autographed a programme of a game against Bayern Munich. Now, Derek Johnson, you've been playing against Bayern Munich from 1972, so that was something else, and I wished him all the best in his job at Firhill. Sorry, Derek, I am a jinx. And then in 1999, I'm walking along the street, September 1989. I'm going to the Rangers against Bayern Munich game that night in the Champions League, and I'm walking along. Is it Thistle Hotel? I recognise that guy coming out of Thistle. I was going down Cambridge Street in Glasgow, just heading towards Sucky Hall Street, and I'm like, that's that guy. And this guy comes walking out of the hotel in the kind of tracksuit bottoms, the trainers, that t-shirt. You're thinking that's just a bit of a Ned or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm saying this as a Ned myself. And I thought, no, I recognise that guy. That's Mehmet Shaw. He looks like Mehmet Shaw. He is Mehmet Shaw because they're playing Rangers the night. This is where he'll be staying. And he's just on his own. And I thought, to hell with this. And there's a tote bookmakers. A bookmaker's just, it might be a Paddy Power now, but it was tote at the time in 1999, just on Cambridge Street. I know that because I've still got the betting slip, which I nicked in, and I just grabbed a betting slip and a bookie's pen, and I followed Mehmet Shaw into the sports shop right in the corner. I went in there, and I remember calling him Herr Shaw, and he looked at me like, what? Just, can I get your autograph? And he gave me, I've written some wee notes in there, but that's Mehmet Shaw's autograph, guy who hit the post, was it the bar? Hit the post, I think, in the 1999, earlier that year, in the Champions League final. They would have beaten Manchester United and Barcelona if that had been in for him. And yeah, I got his autograph, Rangers against Bayern Munich. And so there's a wee connection there. We were playing Bayern Munich in a friendly, get Derek Johnson's autograph, and there's Mehmet Shaw, Rangers against Bayern Munich at Ibrox. And so I went over to Munich. My wife and I had a holiday in Munich, March 2002. Then in April 2002, and I've got the date here. When was it exactly? 11th of April 2002. I'm in the house during the day, as I am, all the wee jobs I used to do, and I got a phone call, and it's my sister who worked in the bookies, ironically, in the Town Centre at the time, and she's like, Gerd Muller's in the Town. What? She's Gerd Muller. He's in Glasgow. He's at the City Chambers. What do you mean? And I don't know if she must have said that something clicked. I'd read something somewhere. The Champions League final was at Hampden that May, a final that I went to. I got a ticket for that one. But Bayern Munich as holders were part of the official party coming to Glasgow, being welcomed officially by Glasgow, the city. This is what happens every year with the Champions League final. And they were bringing the Champions League trophy and handing it over to the city of Glasgow, so for whoever reached the final that year to play for. She's like, I think there's Real Madrid players there as well, all Real Madrid players and all Bayern Munich players. She says, I've seen Billy McNeil. She saw Billy McNeil. I think Andy Roxburgh was there, Alex Ferguson. She'd just been out on a lunch break. I'm like, right. And I just grabbed two things that were on my wall, two little postcards that were on my wall. One of them was of the Real Madrid team who won the European Cup at Hampden in 1960, but the other one was this. It was a picture of the West Germany team holding the 1974 World Cup shortly after they'd won it, with Gerd Muller scoring the winner. And I just headed out there. I headed out to the City Chambers at Hampden. In the City Chambers in the city centre of Glasgow. And I must have taken a pen as well. And I got to the City Chambers just as there's a whole lot of limousines parked at the front, so the dignitaries were obviously still inside. And I always remember a young fella had the 76 European Cup final programme, and he had it in a kind of wallet type thing. I thought, I'm in the land of geeks here. You know, I'm a bit of a geek myself, but not really committed in that way. And just that, Gerd Muller and Franz Beckenbauer come walking out the front. There was a crowd out there. And I saw Andy Roxburgh and Alex Ferguson. They were a bit further up the street. I was standing just at the corner. Oh God, which street is that runs along? St Vincent Street. I was standing towards the St Vincent Street end of the front of the City Chambers, just kind of on the corner of the street there. The big flagstone pavements and the big blocks, the rusticated blocks of the City Chambers wall. And out comes my all-time stats hero, Gerd Muller, the inspiration for the only time I could ever kick a football. And he's with Franz Beckenbauer, and this whole crowd, and the whole crowd just swarmed on him. They flew to him, And I just remember, to me, it'll always be, he went, Gain. Their bomber, he had the beard and the tash and all that. And I thought, what does that mean? Gain. It sounded like get to fuck, basically. Just get to fuck. I've tried, I've known a few German people in my time, and they thought, no, you're hearing that wrong. They couldn't make sense of it. So I've heard it wrong or whatever, but it was pretty obvious that he'd no time. He didn't want autographs or whatever. Der Kaiser, he was quite happily taking the autographs, and the crowd kind of, Ferguson and Roxburgh and Billy McNeil, a European Cup winner from Glasgow, European Cup winning captain from Glasgow, they were further up towards that North Hanover Street. That's up there. No, what is that street? Is it North Hanover Street? Anyway, up they went. The crowd just pushed up, towards, and kind of swept Franz Beckenbauer along with them, swept it away, and Gerd Müller had just jumped in his limousine, chauffeur-driven limousines that were there, with the kind of blacked out windows, and he was gone. And I was like, I'm not interested in anybody else's autograph. And I just sat myself against, having just seen that the man I loved up close. I'd seen him at the 1999 European Cup Winners' Cup final, the last ever Cup Winners' Cup final, Villa Park, Birmingham. I got down to that with my mate, and they had a tribute to all the teams that had won the Cup Winners' Cup. So John Gregg and Gerd Müller, who'd played against each other in the Cup Winners' Cup final and had both won it separately, were on the park that night. So I'd seen him on the pitch, and I'm pretty sure I must have seen him, but it was a bit crazy getting into the 2000s. I was at the opening match of the 2006 World Cup. Germany against Costa Rica, and he had the big massive ceremony there. Pelé was on the park and all that, and I'm sure Gerd Müller must have been on the park that night as well. But I definitely saw him at Villa Park in the flesh. But here I just seen him right up close, and I was like, that'll do for me. And I just sat myself almost to the cover slightly. I just sat my ass against the kind of jutting out part of the wall, the front of the City Chambers. And so the crowd moved away. The whole rumble was going on up. Alec Ferguson, Billy, can I get your autograph? And that was going up a bit further up the street. And it just got really quiet. And then I just heard bzzz, and the window come down on the limousine. And there was Gerd Müller, just beckoning me over, just looking at me going, come here. And he obviously had seen me, and he thought, that guy's not after anybody else's autograph. And plus the crowd's gone now. It's just me and him. That guy. What the hell? It was the strangest bit of curb crawling you've ever seen in your life, because he obviously wasn't fussy, and I knew he was, the reputation, things I'd read about Gerd Müller, is quite a shy fella, and he'd struggled with English during his time in America. He got very lonely, split up with his wife and all that, so I didn't want to be adding to that, so I just got myself out the way. But there he was, just saying, come over. So I just nipped over, shook his hand, and he opened the door. Of the limousine. In my memory, I'm sitting in beside him, but I wasn't. I was leaning over him, and I've written all over it now about how I met him. But at the time, on the back of the postcard, I had all those goals listed, and I knew from Uli Hess-Lichtenberg's Tor. Did I know it was Tor out at that point? I think it might have been, which is it's When Saturday Comes books. There's been a few editions now. I've got two of them where he was the first. It was the English language history of German football, and that changed my life. It really did. It made me love the German national team even more, but it changed it as well because I knew they were human. It made them relatable in a totally different way. And I've never really had the same interest in German football since I knew more about it, if you know what I mean. But Der Bomber I've loved ever since I knew about him. And so I'd written down from a magazine article. And When Saturday Comes, and I can't remember, Mike, that's terrible, I should have brought it out, I can't remember the guy's name, how many goals he scored and what competitions and all that. There's all sorts of different ways of tallying up Gerd Müller's goals. I think it's over 1,000 anyway when it comes to adding on goals that he scored as a youth. And one of the books I've got here, a German book, has got a pub that he played for. Is it Smith's Lounge or something? Smith's State Lounge, when he was obviously in his drinking days in the States. He would play Sunday League and get a few goals. So they've got that. But I had just said what I considered the main goals that he scored, and they tallied up to 666. And the only German word I knew for goals was Tor. The German word for goal is Tor. So I'm trying to break the language barrier by turning this postcard round and going, "You're Tor! You're Tor!" And he's thinking, I just see the number 666 and a big baldy guy shouting. I wasn't his bald then, but and he's kind of, right, yeah. Before that, he tried to sign it. and I had a stupid kind of biro pen with this, obviously really kind of glaze, this shiny surface, typical postcard surface. So it was, I don't know if you can see that there. It's on his face. It's on Gerd Muller himself. He has 2 goes at it, and it's basically just a mark. The biro didn't take, and I thought, I'm not going to bother him any longer. I just shook his hand and said thanks very much, or I probably went danke, and away I went. And I was just absolutely buzzing. I'd met Gerd Muller, that was it. And I think it's because I'd never seen him playing. I'd never actually seen him kicking a ball. Usually that's enough for me. That's all I want. I'm not interested in meeting footballers. I want to see them play. I'm a football fan. Because I could never see him play. Because I'd only ever watched footage of him playing. Because I'd only ever, I don't know if you can see them there in the background. No, you can't. Written to a guy in Germany who took a note of every single goal ever scored in the Bundesliga, so I could at least just track down and see the times that every 365 Bundesliga goals that he scored. I needed to meet him. And I did. And then 2 things happened. Francisco Gento, the guy who's won 6 European Cups, he won all 6 of Real Madrid, 55 to 60 inclusive, and 1966. He come out, just an absolute famous player. The guy who's won more European Cups / Champions Leagues than anybody else. And I was feeling gallus by that point. They snipped along, and I was totally, how you doing, Gento? Any chance you autograph me, wee man? And he was like, so there's Gento. He wrote Gento, Francisco Gento. He wrote his name along his body, his image on that photograph, and that was me. I was just happy as Larry. The Gento thing was a bonus, or I thought it was. I then turned round and heading back towards the Bayern limousine was one Franz Beckenbauer. And he saw me with the pen in my hand and the postcard of him with the World Cup, to be fair to him. And he didn't just look at me as if, you want my autograph, mate? He walked over like, aye, come on, big man, let's do this. You're only human. Yeah, I know it's really me. You're here he was just offering to give me his autograph. I've waited my whole life for this. Somebody needs to know that Gerd Muller was more important than Franz Beckenbauer, and he wasn't. I mean, Franz Beckenbauer was every bit, if not more important, than Gerd Muller, and they were just symbiotic on the part. The 2 of them just loved each other, and the way they played together was phenomenal. So I just went, all right, and turned away. I blanked Franz Beckenbauer. I totally dinged him. It was rude. It was downright rude. If I was going to let anybody know, if I was going to register my protest with anybody about Gerd Muller versus Franz Beckenbauer, the best person to do it to was Franz Beckenbauer, and to do it in front of Gerd Muller. And I say, I don't speak German, and their English probably isn't good enough to cope with Scottish, but that was the best way I could possibly communicate to them that for me, it's always going to be Gerd Muller. But how fucking rude was that to Franz Beckenbauer, who you've got Pele, you've now got Messi and probably Ronaldo, but I would say definitely Messi, Maradona, and Cruyff and Beckenbauer, and just one of the greatest players of all time. And I just like, nah mate, not interested. Totally dinged him, totally rude. I wasn't a young man at the time. I was 2000. I was 32 years old, and I dinged Franz Beckenbauer. So sorry, Franz, that was out of order, mate. But it's only because I loved Gerd Muller so much. But as you always say about Gerd Muller, Bayern would have been nowhere without him. I think Gerd Muller would be the first person to say that Bayern and Germany would have been nowhere without you either, and you'll be sadly missed. Thanks, folks.